Welcome to the channel. I know many of you listen to these videos to relax or fall asleep, and I'm really glad you're here. Before we start today's crime stories, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. And if there's any crime story you'd like me to narrate for you, feel free to request it in the comment section. Now let's begin. Story 1. Marcelo Costa de Andrade was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He lived the first part of his childhood in Rocinha, a large and poor neighborhood called a favela. His mother worked as a maid. His father was not a kind man. Andrade's mother was often hurt by her husband. The home was not a happy or safe place. Because of the troubles at home, Andrade was sent away to live with his grandparents. His grandparents lived in a state called Serra, far from Rio. Life there was different. He later said he earned a lot of money during this time, but he did not explain how a young boy earned this money. After some time, he was sent back to Rio de Janeiro. When he returned, his parents were no longer together. Each parent had new partners. These new adults in his life were not kind to him. He was mistreated. It was during this difficult period that an older man sexually abused Andrade. This experience hurt him deeply and left a mark on his young life. Seeking stability, he was admitted to a boys' school. This was a school where boys could live. He did not do well in his studies there. Other students bullied him. They called him names like retarded. He felt alone and stupid. When he turned 14 years old, the rules of the school said he was too old to stay. The school only kept boys from age 6 to 14. So he was made to leave. With nowhere to go and no skills, Andrade began to sell his body for money. This is called prostitution. He was still very young. He said he usually had a specific role during these acts. One time, an older man forced him into a different role. This upset Andrade greatly. It reminded him of his past abuse. The feeling was so overwhelming that he tried to end his own life. He did not succeed. After his suicide attempt, authorities sent him to a state institution for young people called FEBM. He stayed there for a few months. Then he ran away. Once free, he went back to working as a prostitute because he had no other way to survive. When he was 16, he met a man named Antonio Batista Freire. Freire was a homosexual man who let Andrade live with him. Freire supported him and even brought him to a church called the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God. Andrade lived with Freire for a time. Even with this support, Andrade continued to work as a prostitute. Eventually, he and Freire separated. Andrade then returned to his family's home. This return marked a change. He stopped working as a prostitute. He found formal legal jobs. He used his money to help his family pay for food and electricity. He also helped with cleaning and other chores at home. He became very religious. He attended the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God for about 10 years. He also watched the church's television programs every day. He read the preachings of the church's founder, Bishop Eder Macedo. The teachings were very important to him. In one service, he heard a preacher say that when children die, they go straight to heaven. This idea stuck in his mind. When he was not engaging with religion, he had other interests. He liked to read pornographic magazines. He also enjoyed listening to music by children's entertainers, like a famous singer named Suxa. His mother noticed he had one strange habit. He would sometimes listen to a recorded tape of his own brother, crying as a baby. He did this often, but no one in the family understood why. The idea from his church about children going to heaven stayed in his mind. In April of 1991, Marcelo was coming home from his job distributing pamphlets. He saw a young boy, around 11 years old, selling sweets on the street. Marcelo approached him. He used a story he would repeat many times. He told the boy he needed help with a Catholic religious ritual. He promised the boy a large amount of money for this help, about 3,000 cruzeiros. The boy, wanting to earn money, agreed to go with him. Marcello took the boy to a secluded area with thick bushes, known as a thicket, near the Barreto Viaduct in Niteroi. There, Marcello tried to have sex with the boy. The boy resisted and fought back. Because the boy resisted, Marcello became angry and violent. He picked up some heavy stones from the ground. He hit the boy on the head with the stones until the boy was stunned and could not fight anymore. Then, Marcello strangled the boy with his hands to make sure he was dead. After the boy was dead, Marcello sexually assaulted the body. This was his first murder. He later said that after this crime, he felt a compulsion he could not stop. His second murder happened a short time later. He saw an 11-year-old boy named Anderson Gomez Goulart. Marcello used the same story about money and a religious ritual. He led Anderson to a similar isolated place. This time, Marcello did not wait for resistance. He immediately picked up a stone and struck Anderson on the head. He then strangled him. After the boy was dead, Marcello committed a sexual act on the body. His behavior was becoming more strange. He collected some of Anderson's blood in a small bowl. He later drank this blood at his home. In June 1991, Marcello saw a homeless 11-year-old boy named Oder Jose Muniz dos Santos begging for money. Marcello told Oder he would take him to an aunt's house to get money. Instead, he took Oder to an empty soccer field. He tried to sexually assault the boy while Oder was alive, but he could not. He then strangled Oder to death. He left the body there. He went home, had dinner with his family, and then returned to the field later that night. He used a sharp object to cut off Oder's head. He said he did this because of anger from the bullying he suffered as a child in the boys' school. Marcello continued to do this. He would look for boys who were alone, often poor or working on the street. He used the promise of money and the story of a religious task to gain their trust. He would take them to a quiet, empty place like a thicket, a field, or a deserted beach. He would then try to sexually assault them. If they resisted, or sometimes even if they did not, he would kill them by strangulation or with stones. He would then sexually abuse their bodies. He did this many times over several months. On December 16, 1991, he approached two brothers, 10-year-old Altair and 8-year-old Ivan Medeiros de Abreu, at a bus station. He offered them 4,000 cruzeros to help with a religious ritual. They went with him by bus to a deserted beach. There, Marcello tried to kiss the older brother, Altair. Altair became scared and tried to run. Marcello caught him, threw him to the ground, and held him there. While Altair was stunned on the ground, Marcello sexually assaulted and then strangled the younger brother, Ivan, in front of him. Marcello told Altair that his brother was just asleep. He then took Altair to a gas station to clean up. The gas station attendant saw Marcello and the muddy, quiet boy, but did not think to report it. Marcello and Altair slept in the thicket that night. The next day, Marcello took Altair on a bus toward Rio de Janeiro. He told Altair they could live together. He even went to his job to pick up pamphlets, leaving Altair outside for a moment. This was his mistake. Altair saw his chance and ran away. Altair escaped and went home. He was afraid to tell the truth at first. The next day, he told his sisters that Marcello had killed Ivan. Meanwhile, Marcello did not try to find Altair. Instead, he went back to the beach where Ivan's body was. He moved the body to a different position. A short time later, a police patrol found the body. The police saw that the boy's hands were inside his shorts, which was strange. They quickly ruled out drowning. A medical check later confirmed the boy had been sexually assaulted. The police who found Ivan's body worked to identify him. They circulated the description. Soon, Ivan's mother, Zelia de Abreu, came to the morgue. She identified the body as her missing son. She told the police that Ivan had been with his older brother, Altair. The police then located Altair. Altair was scared but told the police everything that had happened. He described the man who took them and killed Ivan. He remembered the man's name was Marcello because he had heard it at the pamphlet distributing job. Altair also remembered the general area where Marcelo worked. Police officers took Altair to that area to look for Marcelo. They did not have to search for long. Marcelo Costa de Andrade was still working his normal job, distributing pamphlets. Altair pointed him out to the police. The officers approached Marcelo and placed him under arrest. Marcelo did not try to run or fight. He showed no surprise. At the police station, he confessed to killing Ivan Medeiros de Abreu immediately. During questioning, Marcelo was calm and gave clear details. The police asked him if he had hurt anyone else. Marcelo then told them he had killed other boys. He started to list names, dates, and places. He confessed to killing 13 other children before Ivan. The police were shocked. They checked their records of missing children and unsolved murders. The details Marcelo gave matched many of these cases. He knew things only the killer would know, like where the bodies were left and what the victims were wearing. The police took Marcelo to the various crime scenes. He showed them where he had left the bodies. In some cases, he showed them where he had attacked the boys. His memory was very clear. He explained his methods, the story about the religious ritual and money, the move to an isolated spot, the assault, and the killing by strangulation or stones. He also confessed to drinking one victim's blood and decapitating another. Because of the horrible nature of the crimes and his calm, detailed confessions, a judge ordered a psychiatric evaluation. Doctors examined Marcelo to understand his mind. They found that he was not thinking like a normal person. He had a severe psychiatric disorder. He believed that by killing the children, he was sending their souls directly to heaven. In his mind, this was a good act. The doctors concluded he could not tell the difference between right and wrong at the time of the killings. Based on this psychiatric report, Marcelo was declared legally insane. This meant he could not be held fully responsible for his actions in a regular criminal court. He was not sent to a standard prison. Instead, the judge ordered that he be sent to a secure psychiatric hospital for treatment. He was institutionalized at the Enrique Roxo Psychiatric Hospital. The trial was not about whether he did the crimes. He had confessed to everything. The trial was to decide his mental state and his fate. The court upheld the insanity verdict. His sentence was to remain in the psychiatric hospital for as long as he was considered a danger to society. This is called involuntary commitment. For the families of the victims, there was no real justice. They lost their sons. No punishment could bring them back. Some families moved away from their neighborhoods. Others tried to continue with their lives, but the pain remained. Altair, the boy who escaped and helped catch Marcelo, grew up carrying the memory of watching his brother die. Marcelo Costa de Andrade remained in the psychiatric hospital for decades. He was treated by doctors and given medication. Over the years, he applied many times to courts for permission to leave the hospital, saying he was cured. These requests were always denied. The courts decided he was still a danger to the public. He lived his entire adult life inside the secure hospital system. The story ends with Marcelo permanently confined, never receiving freedom after his crimes. Story 2. Ahmad Najib bin Aris was born in the town of Muar, Malaysia, in 1976. He grew up there with his family. He was the second of 4 children. His family was not wealthy. He attended local schools. He went to secondary school. In Malaysia, secondary school has 5 levels called forms. Ahmad Najib studied until Form 3. This means he completed 3 of the 5 levels. After Form 3, he did not continue his studies. He left school. The reason he left school was to get a job. His family needed money, and he had to help support them. In 1998, when he was a young man, Ahmad Najib moved from his hometown of Muar to Kuala Lumpur. Kuala Lumpur is the big capital city of Malaysia. He moved to find better work opportunities. Life in a big city was different from life in his small town. By the year 2000, he had found a steady job. He was employed by Malaysia Airlines. His job was to clean the inside of airplanes. He was a cabin cleaner. He did this work for several years. It was a job that required him to work at night when the planes were on the ground. Around this time, he got married. He and his wife had 2 children. When he was later involved in a major crime, his children were very young, just 1 and 2 years old. The family lived in an area of Kuala Lumpur called Pantai Dalam. People who knew Ahmad Najib during this time described him in a positive way. His co-workers and neighbors said he was a man of good character. They said he was responsible at his job. He did not have a history of violence or serious trouble. He seemed like an ordinary person living an ordinary life. On June 13, 2003, a woman named Kanny Ong was in Kuala Lumpur. She lived in America, but was visiting Malaysia to see her sick father. Her father was feeling better, so Kanny was scheduled to fly back to the United States the next day. On her last night, she went out for a farewell dinner with her family and friends at a restaurant in the Bangsar shopping complex. After dinner, Kanny and her mother and sister went to the shopping complex's underground car park. Kanny's mother was tired. Kanny offered to drive her mother home. Kanny walked back to their family car alone to get a parking ticket. Her mother and sister waited by the payment machine. Kanny did not come back. After 20 minutes, her mother and sister were worried. They called Kanny's mobile phone. There was no answer. They went to look for the car. The car, a purple Proton Tiara, was gone. They asked security guards for help. The guards let them view footage from the security cameras. The video showed Kanny being forced into her own car by a man. The man then drove away with her. A police report about the kidnapping was made more than an hour later. The man in the car was Ahmad Najib bin Aris. He drove Kanny Ong away from the shopping complex. Later that night, at midnight, 2 police officers on a motorcycle saw the purple Proton Tiara parked near a place called Kelana Jaya. They approached the car. They saw Ahmad Najib in the driver's seat and Kanny Ong in the passenger seat. She was still alive. One officer showed his police identification and asked both people for their ID cards. Both Ahmad Najib and Kanny Ong handed their identification cards to the officer. The officer asked them to step out of the car. Ahmad Najib refused to get out. He also stopped Kanny from getting out. The officer later stated that Kanny made strange hand gestures, as if she was trying to ask for help secretly, but he did not understand. Suddenly, Ahmad Najib drove away quickly. The officers still had the ID cards. They shot at the car's tires and tried to follow it, but they lost it. Ahmad Najib drove to a road called Jalan Sungai Way. One of the car's tires was damaged from the police bullet. He stopped to try and change it. A woman named Amina Isahak was waiting in another car nearby. Ahmad Najib walked over and asked to borrow a jack to lift the car. While he was struggling with the tire, Amina saw Kanny Ong in the passenger seat. Kanny was making odd faces at her, trying to signal for help. Amina felt something was wrong. She wrote down the car's license plate number. Ahmad Najib then gave up on changing the tire and drove away again. Amina and her relative went to a police station to report what she saw and gave them the license plate number. Ahmad Najib drove to a construction site along a highway called Jalan Klang Lama. There was a bridge being built there. Between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., inside the car, he raped Kanny Ong. After that, he took a knife and stabbed her twice. These injuries killed her. After Kanny Ong was dead, Ahmad Najib pushed her body into a narrow, deep hole at the construction site. He put 2 large, heavy tires filled with cement over the hole to hide it. He left the purple Proton Tiara near some shop lots, and then left the area in a taxi. The next day, Ahmad Najib bought petrol. He returned to the construction site hole. He poured petrol on Kanny Ong's body and set it on fire. He did this to try and destroy evidence. A few days later, On the morning of June 17th, a construction site manager found the body. The police were called. They had been looking for the missing woman and her car. The car was also found abandoned elsewhere. The police took the body for examination. The police investigation began immediately after the discovery of the body and the abandoned car. Forensic experts examined the body. They found a piece of cloth tied very tightly around the neck. Their examination confirmed that Canny Ong had been strangled. They also confirmed the body had been burned after death. A medical examination found semen inside the victim. The police collected this as crucial evidence. The police already had important clues from the night of the kidnapping. The two police officers who had approached the car still had the ID cards given to them. One card belonged to Canny Ong. The other card belonged to Ahmad Najib bin Aris. This gave the police his full name and identity. The witness, Amina Isahak, had also provided the license plate number of the purple Proton Tiara, which matched the victim's car. The police now had a specific suspect to look for. On June 20th, 2003, the police located and arrested Ahmad Najib bin Aris. They took samples of his DNA. The DNA from Ahmad Najib was sent to a laboratory. Scientists compared it to the semen found on the victim. The tests showed a perfect match. This forensic evidence proved Ahmad Najib had sexual contact with Canny Ong. After his arrest, Ahmad Najib confessed to the police. He told them he had kidnapped, raped, and killed Canny Ong. He led police officers to all the locations where the crimes had taken place. In his statement, he said he had gone to the shopping center car park looking for a former female boss he was angry with. He said he mistakenly thought Canny Ong was that woman and only realized his error when the police officer checked her ID. Ahmad Najib was formally charged with murder and rape. The case went to trial in the High Court in September 2003. During the trial, the prosecution presented all the evidence. This included the DNA match, the confession statement, and the testimony of the two police officers and the witness Amina. A forensic expert also testified that the cloth used to strangle Canny Ong was the same type of specialized cloth used by airplane cleaners, linking it to Ahmad Najib's job. Ahmad Najib's lawyer argued that the confession was not valid. The lawyer said police had forced Ahmad Najib to confess by torturing him. However, the magistrate who had first heard the case testified that Ahmad Najib had no visible injuries and had confessed willingly. The judge ruled the confession could be used as evidence. The defense lawyer also suggested that Canny Ong might have consented to sex, and that her death could have been an accident during a risky sexual act. The prosecution and medical experts rejected this theory, pointing to the violence of the strangulation and the stab wounds. After hearing all the evidence, the judge found Ahmad Najib guilty of both murder and rape. On February 23, 2005, the judge sentenced him to death by hanging for the murder. He also received a sentence of 20 years in prison and 10 strokes of the cane for the rape. Ahmad Najib appealed the decision. His lawyers argued against the evidence and the use of his confession. The Court of Appeal reviewed the case but upheld the guilty verdict and the sentences in March 2007. They agreed the forensic DNA evidence alone was enough to prove his guilt. Ahmad Najib made a final appeal to Malaysia's highest court, the Federal Court. In March 2009, the Federal Court also rejected his appeal. The death sentence was now final. Ahmad Najib then asked for clemency from the Sultan of Selangor, which could have changed his death sentence to life in prison. This plea for mercy was rejected. On September 23, 2016, Ahmad Najib bin Aris was executed by hanging in Kajang prison. His body was given to his family for burial. Before his execution, prison officers reported that he had behaved well in prison and had often led other inmates in religious prayers. For Canny Ong's family, the long legal process brought a painful form of closure. The random and violent nature of the crime had shocked the country. The conviction and execution confirmed that the man responsible had been caught and punished. The story of the case was later featured in a crime documentary and a book about forensic investigations in Asia. The legal process reached its final conclusion with the execution. Story 3. Issei Sagawa was born on April 26, 1949, in Kobe, Japan. His family was very wealthy. His father was the president of a large water treatment company. Issei was born prematurely. He was so small at birth that he could fit into his father's hand. He immediately became very ill with a serious intestinal disease. He recovered after many medical treatments, but he remained physically fragile throughout his childhood. Because he was often sick and not strong, Issei did not play sports or spend much time with other children. He became an introverted and lonely boy. He developed a strong interest in books and literature instead. He felt different and separate from the people around him. When he was in first grade, he saw the thigh of a man and for the first time had a thought about eating human flesh. This thought confused him, but also interested him. As a teenager, he acted on unusual sexual urges with a family pet. Issei attended university. He first went to Wako University in Tokyo. He later earned a master's degree in English literature from Kwansei Gakuin University. He was a good student, but had almost no friends. He felt attracted to tall, healthy-looking Western women who were very different from him. He was only 4 feet 9 inches tall and considered himself ugly and weak. When he was 24 years old and living in Tokyo, an event happened that showed his dangerous thoughts were becoming stronger. He followed a tall German woman to her home. He waited and then broke into her apartment while she was sleeping. He intended to cut off and take a piece of her flesh to eat. However, she woke up, fought him off, and he was captured by police. He was charged with attempted rape. He did not tell the police his true plan to cannibalize her. His wealthy father paid money to the woman to settle the case outside of court. The charges were dropped, and Issei was released. In 1977, when he was 28 years old, Issei moved to Paris, France. He wanted to study for a PhD in literature at the famous Sorbonne University. Living alone in a foreign country made him feel even more isolated. He later said that during this time in Paris, he often brought prostitutes to his apartment. He had a rifle and would think about shooting them, but he could never make himself pull the trigger. He continued to be obsessed with his cannibalistic fantasies, but had not yet acted on them with a person. Issei Sagawa's obsessive fantasies continued to grow in Paris. He decided he would finally act on his desire to kill and eat another person. He began to plan. He owned a small caliber rifle. He chose a target from his university classmates. Her name was Renée Hartevelt. She was a 25-year-old Dutch student. Sagawa was attracted to her because she was tall, healthy, and beautiful. Everything he felt he was not. He believed that by consuming her, he could take her strength into himself. On June 11, 1981, Sagawa put his plan into action. He invited Renée to his apartment for dinner. He gave her a reason that would not seem strange. He asked her to help him with a school assignment. He said he needed her to read some French poetry out loud, so he could practice translating it into Japanese. Renée agreed and came to his apartment at 10 Rue Erlanger. When Renée arrived, they went to his study. She sat at a desk and began to read poetry from a book. Her back was turned to Sagawa. This was the moment he had planned for. He picked up his rifle. He aimed at the back of her neck and fired a single shot. Renée Hartevelt died instantly from the gunshot wound. The sound of the gunshot and the reality of what he had done caused Sagawa to faint. He collapsed onto the floor. He woke up some time later. He saw Renée's body. He now had to continue his plan. First, he sexually assaulted her corpse. After this, he wanted to bite into her flesh, but he found his teeth were not sharp enough to break the skin. He needed proper tools. He left his apartment and went to a nearby shop. He purchased a large butcher knife and a saw. He returned to his apartment. Sagawa then began to dismember Renee's body. He used the saw to cut off her head. He used the butcher knife to cut other parts. He placed some of the body parts in his refrigerator. Over the next 2 days, he ate parts of her body. He ate sections of her face, her thighs, her buttocks, and her breasts. He sometimes ate the flesh raw. Other times, he cooked it in a frying pan. He took photographs of the body at various stages, both before and after he cut it. After several days, the parts of the body he had not eaten began to decay. They started to smell. Sagawa knew he needed to get rid of the evidence. He packed the remaining body parts into 2 large suitcases. He took the suitcases and traveled to the Bois de Boulogne, a large park on the edge of Paris. He was looking for a lake or a remote area to dump the suitcases. He was not stealthy. He struggled with the heavy suitcases in the park. 2 passers-by saw him acting suspiciously. They watched as he dragged the suitcases toward a lake. They noticed a foul smell coming from the suitcases. The passers-by called the police. French police officers arrived in the park quickly. They stopped Sagawa and opened the suitcases. Inside, they found the dismembered remains of René Hartevelt. The police arrested Issei Sagawa on the spot. After his arrest in the park, Issei Sagawa was taken to a Paris police station. He confessed to the murder immediately. He told the police everything he had done. He led them to his apartment. There, the police found more evidence. They found the rifle, the butcher knife, and the saw. They also found the photographs Sagawa had taken of the victim's body. The police identified the victim as René Hartevelt through personal items in the apartment. They notified her family in the Netherlands. Sagawa was held in prison while the French legal system prepared for a trial. His wealthy father in Japan sent a team of lawyers to France to defend him. The lawyers argued that Sagawa was not mentally responsible for his actions. They said he was insane. The French court ordered psychiatric examinations. For 2 years, Sagawa was examined by doctors while in custody. In 1983, the French judge Jean-Louis Bruguière made a ruling. He agreed with the psychiatric reports. The judge declared that Issei Sagawa was legally insane. He was found unfit to stand trial in a criminal court. Because he was declared insane, he could not be found guilty of murder. Instead of a prison sentence, the judge ordered that Sagawa be held indefinitely in a secure mental institution in France. While in the mental institution, Sagawa wrote about his crime in detail. A Japanese author visited him and obtained these writings. The writings were published as a book in Japan called In the Fog. The book became a strange sensation. Sagawa's story and his writings made him famous in a shocking way in Japan. This public attention in Japan likely influenced what happened next. In 1984, the French authorities decided to deport Issei Sagawa back to Japan. They wanted him to be Japan's problem. He was flown to Tokyo and immediately committed to Matsuzawa Hospital, a mental hospital. Japanese doctors were ordered to examine him. The doctors in Japan conducted their own extensive psychiatric tests. Their conclusion was completely different from the French doctors. The Japanese doctors all agreed that Sagawa was sane. They said he understood right from wrong. They concluded his actions were driven by sexual perversion, not insanity. This created a major legal problem. In France, the case was closed because he was declared insane. The French court records were sealed and not sent to Japan. In Japan, the doctors said he was sane, but there was no official criminal case against him in the Japanese courts. The murder happened in France, so Japan had no jurisdiction to put him on trial for it. The French government did not request his extradition back to France. On August 12, 1986, because he could not be legally held, Issei Sagawa walked out of the hospital as a free man. For many years after his release, Sagawa lived freely in Japan. He used his public notoriety to make money. He wrote more books, appeared on television shows, and even wrote restaurant reviews for a magazine. Many people were angry that he was free. They believed it was a failure of justice. The family of Renée Hardevelt was devastated that her killer was never punished by a court of law. As he grew older, Sagawa's life became more difficult. His parents died and he lost their financial support. He lived in a small apartment and had health problems. In 2013, he suffered a stroke which damaged his nervous system. He needed daily care. He told some interviewers that he regretted his actions and the obsession that led to them. Issei Sagawa died of pneumonia in a Tokyo hospital on November 24, 2022, at the age of 73, having never spent a day in prison for his crime. Story 4. Richard Kuklinski was born on April 11, 1935, in an apartment in Jersey City, New Jersey. His father, Stanley, was a railroad worker from Poland. His mother, Anna, was from an Irish family and worked in a meat packing plant. Richard was the second of 4 children. The family did not have much money. Stanley Kuklinski was a violent man who drank too much alcohol. He often beat his wife and his children. When Richard was still a young boy, Stanley left the family, but he would sometimes return. His returns usually meant more beatings for Richard. In 1941, Richard's older brother, Florian, died. Stanley had beaten the 7-year-old boy. Richard's parents told the authorities the child had fallen down the stairs. They hid the real cause. Richard's mother was also abusive. She would hit Richard with objects like broom handles, sometimes breaking them on his body. She was a very strict Catholic. She made Richard go to church and serve as an altar boy. Richard later said he remembered one time when his mother tried to stab his father with a kitchen knife. As he grew up, Richard came to dislike his mother and the church. As a teenager and young man, Richard was quiet and kept to himself. He did not do well in school. He did not have many friends. He began to work different jobs to make money. In the mid-1960s, he got a job at a film lab in Manhattan. His job was to develop movie film. At this job, he saw a way to make extra money illegally. At the film lab, Richard had access to the master copies of movies. He began to make illegal copies of popular films, especially Disney cartoons. He sold these bootleg copies. He also found that there was a big demand for illegal copies of pornographic films. He started copying and selling these too. This was his first steady illegal business. Through selling illegal pornography, Richard met other men who were involved in crime. These men were connected to organized crime families in New York. This was how he began to move in criminal circles. Around this time, Richard married a woman named Linda. They had 2 sons together. While working at a trucking company, he met a secretary named Barbara Pedrusai. Richard and Linda divorced. Richard married Barbara in September 1961. They eventually had 3 children together, 2 daughters and a son. To his neighbors in Dumont, New Jersey, Richard Kuklinski seemed like a normal businessman. He told people he was a wholesale distributor. His wife, Barbara, told people he had an accountant. They lived in a nice house. Barbara noticed that Richard often had large amounts of cash. She suspected some of his money came from illegal activities, but she was afraid to ask him about his work. Richard had a terrible temper. If he left the house suddenly in the middle of the night, Barbara never asked where he was going. Barbara saw 2 sides of her husband. Sometimes he was good Richie. He was a hard worker who provided for his family. He was affectionate and spent time with his children. When one of his daughters was very sick as a baby, Richard stayed up night after night to care for her. Other times he became Bad Richie. This change could happen at any time. Bad Richie had fits of rage. He would smash furniture in the house. He was physically violent toward Barbara. He broke her nose 3 times. He once tried to hit her with his car. His abuse caused her to have several miscarriages. Barbara told him she would kill him if he ever hurt their children, so he did not hit them. But he was emotionally cruel to them. He once killed his daughter's dog in front of her to punish her for coming home late. Barbara once told Richard she wanted to see other people. In response, he quietly stabbed her in the back with a very sharp hunting knife. He told her she belonged to him and that if she left, he would kill her entire family. When she screamed at him, he choked her until she passed out. Richard Kuklinski's only recorded arrest from his early years was for passing a bad check. He was photographed and fingerprinted. The charges were dropped after he agreed to pay back the money. He continued his illegal businesses. He also started leading a group that committed burglaries. The group included a few associates he trusted. By the early 1980s, Richard Kuklinski was a man with 2 lives. To his family and neighbors, he was a father and a businessman. In his other life, he was involved in criminal deals with dangerous people. He had a violent temper that he hid from the outside world. He had learned how to make money from illegal activities, starting with stolen movies. Richard Kuklinski's illegal businesses required him to deal with many people. Some of these dealings ended in murder. His first confirmed murder happened because of a deal over illegal videotapes. On January 30th, 1980, Kuklinski met with a man named George Malaband. Malaband was planning to buy illegal tapes from Kuklinski and was carrying a large amount of cash. During the meeting, Kuklinski shot Malaband 5 times. He killed him for the money. Afterwards, Kuklinski needed to hide the body. He put Malaband's body into a large, 55-gallon metal drum. To make the body fit, he cut the tendons behind the man's knees. He then left the sealed drum near a chemical plant in Jersey City. The body was found a week later. Malaband's brother told police that Malaband was supposed to meet with Kuklinski, which connected Kuklinski to the crime for the first time. Kuklinski's next murder also involved a business deal. On April 29, 1982, he met with a pharmacist named Paul Hoffman. Hoffman wanted to buy a large quantity of stolen prescription drugs from Kuklinski. Hoffman brought $25,000 to the meeting. Kuklinski lured Hoffman into a rented garage. He tried to shoot Hoffman, but his gun jammed and would not fire. Instead, Kuklinski beat Hoffman to death with a tire iron. He then placed Hoffman's body into another 55-gallon drum. He left this drum outside a motel in Little Ferry, New Jersey. The drum later disappeared, and Hoffman's body was never found. During this time, Kuklinski was the leader of a burglary group. The group included Gary Smith, Daniel Deppner, Daniel's wife Barbara Deppner, and another man named Percy House. By late 1982, the police were investigating this burglary ring. Percy House was arrested. He decided to cooperate with the police and became an informant. Warrants were issued for the arrest of Gary Smith and Daniel Deppner. Kuklinski told Smith and Deppner to hide in a motel room in North Bergen. While hiding, Gary Smith talked about leaving his criminal life. Kuklinski feared that Smith would also become a police informant. Kuklinski decided that Smith had to be killed. He brought Smith a hamburger that he had poisoned with cyanide. After Smith ate it, the poison was slow to work. So Daniel Deppner then strangled Smith with a lamp cord. They hid Smith's body between the mattress and the box spring of the motel bed. Kuklinski and Deppner then left. Over the next 4 days, several guests rented the same motel room. They noticed a bad smell, but did not find the body. Finally, on December 27, 1982, the motel manager searched the room and discovered the decomposing body. The police were called. The medical examiner saw a mark on Smith's neck from the cord. This proved he was strangled. The poison in his stomach would not have been found if not for the obvious murder. After Smith's murder, Kuklinski no longer trusted Daniel Deppner. He was afraid Deppner would talk to the police. Sometime between February and May of 1983, Kuklinski killed Deppner. He murdered him in an apartment in Bergenfield that belonged to his daughter's fiancé. He likely used cyanide again, and also strangled him. Kuklinski then wrapped the body in green plastic garbage bags. He drove to a remote wooded road in West Milford and dumped the body. It was found by a bicyclist on May 14, 1983. The medical examiner found strange pink spots on the skin, a possible sign of cyanide, but the exact cause of death was unclear. This was the third associate of Kuklinski's found dead. Another murder was connected to a deal from 2 years earlier. On July 1, 1981, a man named Louis Mosquet met Kuklinski at a diner. Mosquet planned to buy blank videotapes and had over $95,000 in his van. Kuklinski shot Mosquet in the back of the head and took his money. To hide this crime in a unique way, Kuklinski put Mosquet's body in a commercial freezer. He kept the body frozen for over a year. In September 1983, he dumped the frozen body near a park in Orangetown, New York. The body was discovered on September 25, 1983. Because the body was still partially frozen and wrapped in plastic, the medical examiner found ice crystals inside it on a warm day. This discovery showed the police that the killer had used a freezer to store the body. This method led investigators to give the unknown killer a nickname, the Iceman. Police in New Jersey and New York began to see connections between these murders. The victims were all last seen with the same man, Richard Kuklinski. They were all involved in shady deals with him. The methods were different, shooting, beating, poison, but the result was always the same. The victims disappeared, and their money ended up with Kuklinski. A joint task force between the New Jersey Attorney General's office and federal agents was formed. They called their investigation Operation Iceman. Their goal was to gather enough evidence to arrest Kuklinski. They knew he was dangerous and careful. They needed to catch him planning a new crime. The police task force, Operation Iceman, needed direct evidence against Richard Kuklinski. They knew he was suspicious, so they devised a plan to have an undercover agent befriend him. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, assigned Special Agent Dominic Polifrone to the case. Polifrone went undercover using the name Dominic Provenzano. He posed as a criminal connected to the mafia. With the help of one of Kuklinski's old friends, Polifrone was introduced to Kuklinski in 1985. Polifrone spent over a year building a relationship with Kuklinski. He bought a gun with a silencer from him. During their conversations, which Polifrone secretly recorded, Kuklinski talked openly about murder. He explained his preference for using cyanide poison because it was clean and quiet. He mentioned keeping a body in a freezer for 2.5 years, confirming the method used in the Louis Mosquet case. Kuklinski also bragged about killing a man by putting cyanide on his hamburger, which matched the method used on Gary Smith. To gather definitive proof, Polifrone told Kuklinski he wanted to hire him for a murder. Polifrone said he needed a wealthy cocaine dealer killed. Kuklinski agreed and discussed his plan in detail on the recordings. He also asked Polifrone to supply him with pure cyanide for the job. The police arranged for Polifrone to give Kuklinski a vial of a substance that looked like cyanide. On December 17, 1986, Kuklinski met Polifrone in a parking lot to get the cyanide. After the meeting, Kuklinski was suspicious. To test the substance, he put some on a piece of hamburger and fed it to a stray dog. The dog did not die, proving it was not real poison. Kuklinski realized he might be dealing with an undercover agent. He decided not to go through with the planned murder and drove home. However, the police were already moving. They had enough evidence from the recorded conversations. 2 hours after the meeting, they set up a roadblock and arrested Kuklinski as he drove. His wife, Barbara, was in the car. Police found a gun in the vehicle, and she was also arrested for possessing it. Kuklinski was charged with 5 counts of murder, along with weapons charges and attempted murder. At his trial in 1988, the prosecution played the secret recordings. Kuklinski's former associates, including Percy House and Barbara Deppner, testified against him. They described his role in the burglary ring and the murders. The defense argued that Kuklinski was just boasting on the tapes and that there was no physical proof he personally killed anyone. They said the other witnesses were criminals who were lying to get deals for themselves. The jury found Richard Kuklinski guilty of the murders of Gary Smith and Daniel Deppner. Because the exact cause of death for Deppner was uncertain, he was not given the death penalty. Instead, he was sentenced to serve at least 60 years in prison. After the trial, to avoid further court cases and to protect his family from additional legal trouble, Kuklinski pleaded guilty to killing George Malaband and Louis Mosquet. He was given 2 additional life sentences, to be served one after the other. He also confessed to killing Paul Hoffman, but since he was already going to prison for life, no further trial was held. As part of this plea deal, the gun charge against his wife and a minor drug charge against his son were dropped. Richard Kuklinski was sent to Trenton State Prison. He would not be eligible for parole until the year 2046, when he would be 111 years old. This meant he would die in prison. While in prison, Kuklinski gave many interviews to journalists, psychiatrists, and documentary filmmakers. He claimed to have committed many more murders than those he was convicted of, sometimes saying he killed over 100 people. He said he worked as a hitman for organized crime families. Law enforcement officials investigated these claims, but could not find evidence to support most of them. They believed he exaggerated his crimes to build a fearsome reputation. In late 2005, Kuklinski became very ill with heart disease. He was moved to a hospital prison ward. He died there on March 5, 2006, at the age of 70. The medical cause was a heart attack. With his death, the case of the Iceman was closed. Richard Kuklinski spent the final years of his life in prison for the murders he committed, and he died there, never having been released. Story 5. Henry Lee Lucas was born in a small, poor cabin in Blacksburg, Virginia, in August 1936. His family life was very difficult from the beginning. His father was a double amputee who had lost his legs in a train accident. His mother, Viola, had problems with alcohol and worked as a prostitute to make money. When Henry was a very young child, his mother did something that confused and hurt him. She would sometimes force Henry and his siblings to watch her have sex with her customers. If Henry turned away or refused to watch, his mother would beat him as punishment. This was one of his earliest memories. The violence from his mother became more severe. When Henry was 8 years old, she hit him in the head with a piece of wood. The injury was so bad that he fell into a coma for 3 days. This severe head trauma likely caused damage to his brain. Another violent incident happened when Henry was 10. He was fighting with one of his brothers, who stabbed him near his left eye with a knife. His mother did not get him medical help. A few days later, a teacher at school accidentally hit the injured eye with a ruler. The eyeball ruptured. Doctors had to remove the eye completely and replace it with a glass one. Medical experts later believed these head injuries contributed to brain damage. Henry's mother also forced him to wear girls' clothing in public. She did this for a long time, for several years. She told people he was a girl named Mona. She reportedly did this so she could later force him into prostitution. School officials eventually noticed, and a court ordered her to stop making him dress like a girl. However, the abuse at home did not stop. Henry was often bullied by other children because of his glass eye, his poverty, and the way his mother dressed him. He felt rejected by everyone. He began to hate people. He said he was treated like the family dog. His father died of pneumonia after being left outside in the cold. Henry dropped out of school in the 6th grade and ran away from home, living on the roads around Virginia. As a teenager, with no guidance or stable home, Henry's behavior became more disturbing. He began an incestuous relationship with a half-brother. He also started capturing small wild animals. He would perform sexual acts on these animals and then kill them. This pattern of harming weaker creatures was a sign of his developing violent and abnormal urges. He drifted from place to place, working small jobs when he could. His early life provided no love, safety, or moral guidance. It was filled with violence, sexual abuse, neglect, and rejection. These experiences shaped his emotional development and his view of the world. Henry Lucas claimed he committed his first murder when he was 14 years old. He said he met a 17-year-old girl named Laura Burnsley at a bus stop in Virginia in 1951. He tried to have sex with her, but she refused. He then strangled her. He said he buried her body in the woods. He later said this crime scared him, but it was something he felt driven to do after years of watching his mother's behavior. This body was never found, and he later took back his confession. In late 1959, Lucas was living in Michigan with a half-sister. His mother, Viola, came to visit for Christmas. She argued with Henry because she wanted him to move back to Virginia to take care of her. He refused. On January 11, 1960, they argued again. His mother hit him on the head with a broom. Lucas, who had been drinking, stabbed her in the neck with a knife. He then ran away. His sister found their mother alive but badly wounded. An ambulance came, but Viola Lucas died from her injuries. The police initially said she died of a heart attack caused by the attack. Lucas was arrested in Ohio. He told the police he acted in self-defense after years of beatings, but the court did not believe him. He was found guilty of second-degree murder and sent to prison for up to 40 years. In prison, Lucas tried to kill himself several times. He was sent to a mental hospital for treatment. Because prisons were crowded, he was released after serving only 10 years in June 1970. His life outside of prison was unstable. He was arrested again for trying to kidnap a teenager at gunpoint. After another prison term, he got married, but his wife accused him of hurting her young daughters, and they separated. In 1976, Lucas moved to Florida. At a soup kitchen, he met a man named Otis Toole. The two became close friends. Lucas moved in with Toole and Toole's mother. He also became close to Toole's young niece, a 12-year-old girl named Becky Powell. Lucas and Toole started working together for a roofing company. During this time, Lucas later said, he and Toole began a long series of murders. They drove to different states. They looked for people who would be easy targets and hard to miss, like hitchhikers and sex workers. Lucas said they used guns, knives, and even their car to kill people. He claimed that Toole did very cruel things to the victims after they were dead. Lucas said he felt no emotions during these killings. In early 1982, Lucas took Becky Powell, who was now 15, and ran away from Florida. He told people she was his wife. They traveled to California and got a job taking care of an 82-year-old woman named Kate Rich. After a few weeks, Kate Rich disappeared. Lucas and Becky also disappeared after writing checks from Kate Rich's bank account. Lucas and Becky Powell next went to Texas. A minister at a small church gave them a place to stay and found Lucas work. However, Becky became unhappy and wanted to go back to Florida. She argued with Lucas. On August 23, 1982, Lucas took Becky to a field. He later said that during an argument, he stabbed her in the chest with a knife, killing her. He then had sex with her dead body. After that, he cut her body into pieces and scattered them. In September 1982, Lucas was alone. He claimed he convinced Kate Rich to come to Texas by telling her he had found Becky. He said he then stabbed Kate Rich to death, carved a symbol on her chest, and put her body in a drain pipe. On June 10, 1983, A Texas Ranger arrested Lucas for having a gun illegally. While he was in jail, Lucas wrote a letter to the sheriff. He said he had been killing people for 10 years and that no one believed him. He specifically said he had killed Becky Powell and Kate Rich. He led police to areas where he said he left their bodies. Investigators found human remains in both places, but the bodies were too decomposed to be easily identified. Because Lucas knew where the bodies were, the police started to believe his other claims. Lucas was moved to a different jail in Texas. After a few days there, he said he would confess to more crimes. He began talking to police from many different states. He confessed to over 100 murders. He gave details about how he killed people, where he did it, and who the victims were. Because he knew facts about old unsolved cases, a special police group called the Lucas Task Force was formed. Their job was to check his confessions. Police officers gave Lucas special treatment for his cooperation. They took him to restaurants, let him walk around, and showed him files about the murder cases. He confessed to so many murders that police departments across the country began to close their old unsolved case files, believing Lucas had solved them. The large number of murders Henry Lucas confessed to soon attracted attention from outside the police task force. A journalist named Hugh Ainsworth began to investigate Lucas's claims for a newspaper. He checked the details of the confessions against facts that could be proven. He found a major problem. Lucas had confessed to murders in many different states, often saying they happened very close together in time. The journalist mapped out the travel this would require. He calculated that Lucas would have had to drive thousands of miles in just a few weeks in his old car to be in all those places. This timeline was impossible. The newspaper published this story in 1985. This report made law enforcement officials start to doubt Lucas. They began a more careful review of the evidence. The investigation found serious problems with how the Lucas task force had worked. The police had given Lucas too much information. They had shown him case files, photos, and maps of the unsolved murders. This meant Lucas could learn details about a crime and then repeat them in a confession, making it seem like he had personal knowledge. The police interviews were often not recorded, so there was no proof of what questions were asked or what information was given to Lucas first. The special investigation also checked Lucas's own whereabouts against the dates of the murders. They used things like work records, pay stubs, and traffic tickets. They found that for many of the murders he confessed to, Lucas was proven to be in a different state at the time. He could not have committed those crimes. The Texas Attorney General released a report stating that officials had been too quick to believe Lucas and had used his confessions to clear old case files without real proof. Because of this, almost all of the hundreds of confessions were thrown out. Lucas's credibility was destroyed. The police methods were criticized, and the case led to changes in how confessions are handled. It showed how someone might falsely confess to gain rewards like better treatment or simply for attention. However, police still believed Lucas was guilty of some murders where the evidence was stronger. He was eventually convicted of 11 murders. The ones he was formally found guilty of included his mother, Viola Lucas, Becky Powell, Kate Rich, and several other women. For one murder, the victim was an unidentified woman found in Texas wearing only orange socks. Lucas confessed to this killing and was sentenced to death for it. Later, even this death sentence was questioned. Defense lawyers proved that details in Lucas's orange socks confession matched information in the case file he had been allowed to read. This meant his knowledge of the crime did not prove he was there. In 1998, the governor of Texas, George W. Bush, changed Lucas's death sentence to life in prison because of these doubts about the evidence. Henry Lucas died in prison in March 2001 from heart failure at the age of 64. The many murders he famously confessed to are now widely considered to be false, a product of a flawed police process and a man willing to lie for small comforts. though he likely did commit a smaller number of violent crimes. The story of Henry Lee Lucas ended not as the story of America's most prolific killer, but as a famous example of how the justice system can be misled by false confessions. Story 6. Otis Elwood Toole was born on March 5, 1947, in Jacksonville, Florida. He grew up in a poor part of the city. His family life was very difficult. His father was a severe alcoholic. He was often violent and then abandoned the family completely when Otis was young. This left Otis with his mother and siblings. His mother, who was also a heavy drinker, was emotionally abusive. She was unhappy with having a son and had wanted a daughter. To upset him, or as a form of punishment, she would often dress young Otis in girls' clothing and call him Susan. This caused him shame and confusion from a very early age. The home was not a safe place. Otis later stated that he was sexually abused as a child by several people. These people included an older sister and a neighbor. He also said he was physically beaten by his older brothers. He claimed his maternal grandmother was involved in what he called satanic practices. He said she exposed him to strange rituals, including visits to graveyards. Whether this was entirely true or a product of his troubled mind is unclear, but it contributed to his frightening childhood experiences. He said that when he realized he was attracted to other boys and told his family, the abuse from them got worse. Otis had learning difficulties. School tests later showed he had a low IQ of 75, which is classified as a mild intellectual disability. He also suffered from epilepsy, a condition that causes seizures. He would have violent, full-body seizures that frightened other children and made it hard for him to lead a normal life. Because home was so unpleasant, he ran away frequently as a child. He would sleep in empty, abandoned houses around Jacksonville. From a very young age, he developed a dangerous habit. He started setting fires. He found that watching fires excited him, not just as a thrill, but in a sexual way. This condition is known as pyromania. He would set fire to buildings or fields because it gave him a powerful feeling of arousal and control. This was one of the first major signs of his troubled mind. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade, around age 15. With no education and no stable home, he began to spend his time on the streets. He started visiting gay bars in Jacksonville. To get money, he engaged in prostitution, offering sex to men for cash. He also became obsessed with gay pornography. His life became a cycle of drifting, petty crime, and seeking casual sex. He later claimed that his first violent death happened when he was 14. He said a traveling salesman offered him sex. Afterward, Otis said he ran over the salesman with the man's own car. This story, told by him much later, is hard to verify. His first official arrest was at age 17 in 1965 for loitering, which means hanging around without a clear purpose. For several years after that, his movements are not well documented. It is believed he left Jacksonville and drifted around the southwestern United States. He supported himself through prostitution and by begging for money, known as panhandling. He lived in places like Nebraska and Colorado for short times. In these places, he later became a suspect in some local murders, but he was not charged at the time. He always moved on before the police could build a solid case against him. In early 1975, he returned to his hometown of Jacksonville. Perhaps seeking some kind of normalcy, he married a woman much older than him in January 1976. The marriage lasted only 3 days. His wife left when she discovered he was homosexual. Otis later said he only married to try to hide his true sexuality from society and from himself. His life was rootless, lonely, and marked by a series of failed attempts to fit in. He was a man with deep psychological wounds from childhood, a mind that worked differently from others, and urges that he did not know how to control in a safe way. He was back in Jacksonville, unanchored and angry at the world. Soon after his failed marriage, Otis Toole was spending time at a soup kitchen in Jacksonville. There, in 1976, he met another man named Henry Lee Lucas. Lucas was also a drifter with a difficult past. The two men became companions. They likely began a sexual relationship. More importantly, they found a common interest in violence. They started traveling together, driving around the country in Lucas's car. They supported themselves by begging and stealing. Together, they began to commit crimes. Their main crimes were arson and murder. Toole's old obsession with fire returned. They would find abandoned buildings or, later, homes with people inside and set them on fire. Toole enjoyed the act of setting the fire and watching it burn. They also started to kill people. Their victims were often people they met while hitchhiking or people who were vulnerable and alone. They would pick up hitchhikers, or sometimes Toole would approach people at bus stations or truck stops. They used lies to gain trust, offering rides or friendship. Their method for murder was often simple and brutal. They used weapons that were easy to get and carry, like knives and handguns. Sometimes they strangled their victims. They did not have a single, careful plan for each murder. Instead, the murders usually happened on impulse. They might be driving with a hitchhiker, an argument would start, or they would simply decide in the moment to kill the person. Then they would steal whatever money or valuables the victim had. They would dump the body in a remote area near a highway, and then drive away. Toole later claimed that some of the killings were done for a satanic cult called the Hands of Death. He said the cult paid them to kill people. Police investigators later found no proof this cult was real. They believed Toole made up the story to make his crimes seem more important or organized than they were. In Jacksonville, Toole sometimes committed crimes alone. On January 4, 1982, he went to a boarding house where a 65-year-old man named George Sonnenberg lived. Toole had known Sonnenberg and had begun a sexual relationship with him. On this day, they had a fight. Because Toole was angry, he decided to set a fire. He barricaded the door of Sonnenberg's room so the man could not escape. Then he set the boarding house on fire. Sonnenberg was trapped inside. He was rescued but died in the hospital a week later from severe burns. Toole continued to drift and commit crimes. In February 1983, in Tallahassee, Florida, he met a 19-year-old woman. He strangled her to death. He left her body and traveled back to Jacksonville. A few months later, in April 1983, he was still in Jacksonville. He set another fire, this time in an empty building. This act of arson was not planned to hurt anyone. He just wanted to see a fire. However, the fire was noticed quickly, and the police arrested him for it. This was a minor crime compared to murder, but it was the arrest that finally stopped him. While Toole was in jail in Florida for the arson charge, Henry Lee Lucas was arrested in Texas in June 1983 for a minor weapons crime. Once in custody, Lucas began to talk. He boasted to the police about many murders he had done. He named Otis Toole as his partner for some of them. The police in Texas contacted the police in Florida. When Florida investigators questioned Toole about the murders Lucas described, Toole at first denied it, but after a while, he also began to confess. He saw that Lucas was getting attention for his stories. Toole started to give his own confessions, backing up Lucas's stories and adding new crimes, including murders he said he did alone. On October 21, 1983, while in prison, Toole confessed to a crime that had gotten national attention: the murder of a 6-year-old boy named Adam Walsh in Hollywood, Florida, in 1981. Toole told police that he had taken Adam from a shopping mall parking lot by offering him toys and candy. He said when Adam began to cry for his mother, Toole hit him and knocked him out. He then drove to a remote road, decapitated the boy with a machete, and later threw the head into a canal. He gave details that only the killer would know. The police took his confession seriously, but a critical mistake happened. The police had earlier impounded Toole's car, which might have had evidence, but they lost the car and the blood-stained carpet inside it. Without this physical proof, it was hard to prove his confession was true. Back in Florida, Toole was put on trial for the murder of George Sonnenberg, the man who died in the boarding house fire. During the trial, Toole changed his story. He said he did not set that fire and had only confessed, so he would be moved from Texas back to Florida. The jury did not believe his new story. On April 28, 1984, they found him guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced him to death. Later that same year, he was also convicted for the murder of the 19-year-old Tallahassee woman and received a second death sentence. Otis Toole was now a convicted serial killer on death row. After Otis Toole was sentenced to death in Florida, his cases entered the appeals process. This is a legal system where higher courts review the trial to look for mistakes. Because of Toole's well-documented low intelligence and possible mental illness, his lawyers argued against the death sentences. The Florida Supreme Court examined the cases. The court agreed that there were problems with imposing the death penalty in his specific situation. As a result, both of his death sentences were changed to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This meant he would stay in prison until he died, but he would not be executed. With the threat of execution gone, Toole began confessing to more unsolved murders. He was already serving life sentences, so he had little to lose by talking. In 1991, he pleaded guilty to the murders of 4 more people in Jacksonville: John McDaniel, Geraldine Peoples, Brenda Burton, and Ruby McCary. He received 4 additional life sentences for these crimes. Police believed his confessions in these cases were reliable because he knew details that had not been made public. These confessions helped close several cold cases, giving some families answers. The most famous case linked to Toole was the murder of Adam Walsh. For years, the Hollywood, Florida police had considered Toole their main suspect, but they lacked the physical evidence to officially close the case. The loss of his car in the 1980s had been a major setback. Decades later, under new leadership, the police department decided to re-examine the entire investigation. They gathered all the old evidence and statements. They reviewed Toole's many confessions to the crime, which had remained consistent over the years. They also considered his well-known method of targeting victims and his presence in South Florida at the time. In 2008, the police announced the results of their review. They stated that based on the totality of the evidence, including Toole's repeated confessions, his history of similar violence, and the circumstantial details, they were officially concluding that Otis Toole was the person who killed Adam Walsh. The police chief, Chadwick Wagner, held a press conference to address the Walsh family directly. He formally apologized for the investigative mistakes made in the 1980s, particularly the loss of the car. He admitted that while there was no new DNA or magic wand piece of evidence, the existing evidence only pointed to Toole. John Walsh, Adam's father, who had become a victims' rights advocate, agreed with the finding. The case was officially closed. Otis Toole never stood trial for Adam Walsh's murder. He was already serving multiple life sentences in the Florida state prison system. His health began to fail due to a lifetime of heavy drinking. He developed cirrhosis of the liver, a disease that causes the liver to stop working. On September 15, 1996, at the age of 49, Otis Toole died from complications of cirrhosis in the prison hospital. No family members came to claim his body. The state of Florida buried him in a cemetery located on the grounds of the Florida State Prison, his grave marked only by a number. The victims' families, like the Walshes, were left to live with the consequences. The official closure of the Adam Walsh case provided a measure of answers, though not the comfort of a courtroom conviction. Other families of his victims knew he died in prison, serving the sentences for his confessed crimes. Otis Toole's life of violence, which began with a tragic and abused childhood, ended silently behind prison walls, his many victims remembered long after he was gone. Story 7. William Lester Suff was born in Texas in 1950. He was the oldest of 5 children in his family. His childhood was not easy. His mother was a very controlling person. She made all the decisions in the house. His father was quiet and did what his wife said. From watching his mother, William learned a lesson. He learned that he could get what he wanted by being forceful with others. Nothing especially unusual happened in his early youth. He was a boy who liked music. He learned to play instruments well. He was not the most popular child, but he did make friends without much trouble. His family was not rich, but they had what they needed. In 1960, when William was 10 years old, his parents separated. They accused each other of being unfaithful. After the separation, his mother began to work as a prostitute. This work by his mother made William develop a strong dislike for prostitution. Soon after, his mother began a new relationship with another man. This man was very strict. He was also cruel to the children in the house. As a teenager, William continued with music. In 1968, when he was 18 years old, he was in a marching band. At a band event, he met a 15-year-old girl named Terrell. They started to date. Their relationship moved quickly. William and Terrell got married in 1969, when she was still young. After they were married, William's behavior changed. He began to speak to Terrell in a mean and threatening way. He would give her orders. He told her that if she did not obey him, he would kill her. Terrell was afraid of him. In November 1970, Terrell gave birth to their first child, a son. They named him William Lester Suff Jr. in July 1973. Terrell gave birth to their second child, a daughter named Digiania. From the moment the baby girl was born, William behaved badly toward her. He could not stop hitting the newborn infant. Terrell was unhappy and afraid in her marriage. On September 25, 1973, she felt she had to leave the family home. She made a decision to go away for a while. She left the care of her 2-month-old daughter with William. After Terrell left the home on September 25, 1973, William Suff was alone with his 2-month-old daughter, Digiania. He became angry with the crying infant. He hit the baby very hard. The baby stopped breathing. Suff called Terrell and told her something was wrong with their daughter. Terrell rushed back to the house. She found the baby unconscious. She called for an ambulance. Medical workers arrived, but the baby was already dead. A doctor later examined the baby's body. The doctor found proof that the baby had been hit many times, starting from the day she was born. Because of this, William Suff and Terrell were both arrested for causing the death of a child. In 1974, a court in Texas found William Suff guilty of beating his daughter to death. The court sentenced him to 70 years in prison. However, William Suff did not serve the full sentence. He was released from prison on parole on March 6, 1984, after only 10 years. He moved to Riverside County in California. He got a job as a clerk in a county warehouse, delivering office supplies. On January 10, 1989, Suff picked up a sex worker named Rhonda Jetmore, who was 27 years old. They agreed she would perform a sex act for money. Inside his vehicle, Suff suddenly attacked her. He put his hands around her neck and choked her. Jetmore fought back. She had a small flashlight. She hit Suff in the head with it. This made him let go for a moment. Jetmore tried to run, but Suff grabbed her and pulled her down. He tore her clothes. He forced his finger into her mouth. She bit down so hard one of her own teeth broke. Suff pulled his hand back. Jetmore got up and ran toward the car door, but Suff tackled her again. She begged him to let her go. During the struggle, Suff's glasses fell off. Jetmore saw them. She used her flashlight to shine light on the glasses. When Suff leaned over to pick them up, she opened the door and ran into the street. She stopped a passing car. The person in the passenger seat was someone she knew. That person had a gun and fired a shot toward Suff. Jetmore got into the car and escaped. She reported the attack to the police. Months later, on June 28, 1989, a woman's body was found near Lake Elsinore. She was identified as 28-year-old Kimberly Little. She had been strangled by someone's hands. She had bruises on her head and burns from cigarettes on her arms. These injuries happened before she died. A blue towel was over her body. Police later found that fibers on the towel matched a sleeping bag in William Suff's van. On December 13, 1989, another body was found on a hillside. She was Christina Leal, aged 23. She had been strangled and stabbed. Her wrists and ankles had marks from being tied up. Her face was scratched. She had a black eye. She had 4 stab wounds in her chest. She had knife wounds on her genitals. One of her nipples was partly cut off. A light bulb had been pushed inside her vagina. All these things were done while she was still alive. The killings continued. On January 18, 1990, 23-year-old Darla Jane Ferguson was found strangled in Riverside. A plastic trash bag was over her upper body, tied with a rope. Her legs were positioned in the air. She had also been hit in the head before death. Suff's methods varied. On February 9, 1990, the body of 35-year-old Carol Lynn Miller was found in a fruit orchard. She had been smothered, likely with a hand over her mouth, which tore the skin inside her lip. She was also stabbed 5 times. A peeled grapefruit was by her body. Later that year, on November 6, 1990, the body of 33-year-old Cheryl Coker was found partly inside a dumpster. She was strangled with something thin and strong like a wire that cut into her neck. Her right breast had been cut off after she died and was left on a road nearby. Police found a shoe print at this scene. Suff began to pose the bodies. On December 21, 1990, 27-year-old Susan Sternfeld was found naked and carefully placed near a dumpster. She had been strangled. On January 19, 1991, 42-year-old Kathleen Milne was found. A white sock was stuffed deep into her throat. She had been strangled, and the sock blocked her airway. More bodies of strangled women were found through 1991 near lakes and alleys. Some were stabbed. Some had their breasts cut off after death. On September 13, 1991, 30-year-old Catherine McDonald was found. She was 4 months pregnant. She was posed with her arms and legs spread. She had been stabbed in the chest and neck. Her right breast was removed. Shoe prints found near her body matched the prints from the Cheryl Coker scene. The last known victim was Eleanor Casares, age 39, found on December 23, 1991. She had been stabbed and strangled. Her breast was also removed after death. During this time, the police in Riverside County knew a serial killer was active. They found similar shoe prints and patterns in several murders. They formed a task force to find the killer, but they did not have a suspect. The series of murders stopped at the end of 1991. The police task force had many pieces of evidence, but no name for the killer. This changed on January 9, 1992. A police officer pulled over a man for a minor traffic violation. The man was William Suff. During the traffic stop, the officer saw a knife in plain view inside the vehicle. The knife had what looked like dried blood on it. The officer also saw other items that seemed suspicious. Because of this, Suff was arrested at the scene. The police searched Suff's home and vehicle. They found the sleeping bag that matched fibers on the towel from Kimberly Little's body. They took shoes from his home. Police experts compared these shoes to the shoe prints found at the scenes where Cheryl Coker and Catherine McDonald were discovered. The pattern, size, and wear on the soles matched exactly. A major break in the case came from a different piece of evidence. Semen was collected from the body of a suspected victim named Sherry Pacer. The DNA analysis showed evidence from two men, which was unclear. However, the strongest DNA profile in the sample matched William Suff. This did not prove he killed her, but it proved he had recent sexual contact with her before her death. The police also made a shocking discovery about Suff's job. He worked as a warehouse clerk for Riverside County. Part of his job was to deliver office furniture and supplies. He had personally delivered items to the very police building where the task force investigating the murders was located. The detectives hunting for the serial killer had unknowingly met him. With all the physical evidence, William Suff was charged with 12 murders and 1 attempted murder. The trial began in 1995. The prosecutors showed the jury the matching shoe prints, the fiber evidence, and the DNA connection. They also presented evidence about the death of his infant daughter in Texas to show a history of violence. Suff did not speak in his own defense. On July 19, 1995, the jury found William Suff guilty of all 12 murders and the attempted murder of Rhonda Jetmore. The next part of the trial was to decide his punishment. During this penalty phase, the jury heard more details about his past crime and his abuse of another child. After only 10 minutes of discussion, the jury decided he should receive the death penalty. On October 26, 1995, the judge formally sentenced William Suff to death. He was sent to San Quentin State Prison to live on death row. In 2014, he appealed his sentence, but the California Supreme Court said the death penalty was correct. In 2019, the state of California stopped carrying out the death penalty. The law changed, and his sentence was changed to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will spend the rest of his life in prison. The victims' families had closure from the trial. Rhonda Jetmore, the woman who survived, helped put him in prison with her testimony. In 2024, police announced that new evidence linked William Suff to another murder from 1986, a 19-year-old woman named Kathy Ann Small. This showed his crimes started earlier than anyone knew. William Suff was caught because of a routine traffic stop, and the justice system ensured he would never harm anyone again. Story 8. Juan Corona was born on February 7, 1934, in a small town in Mexico called Ayutla. He grew up in a large family. When he was 16 years old, he decided to go to the United States. He crossed the border into California without official papers. He did this because several of his older brothers and one sister had already done the same thing. He wanted to find work and make money. His first job in the United States was picking vegetables like carrots and melons in the hot fields of the Imperial Valley. This was very hard physical work. After 3 months, he moved north to the Sacramento Valley to look for other work. A few years later, in 1953, he moved to the Marysville and Yuba City area. He moved there because his half-brother, Natividad, suggested it. Natividad was already living there. Juan found work on a local ranch. Juan Corona got married in October 1953 to a woman named Gabriela. The marriage did not last. In 1958, he married again to a woman named Gloria. They eventually had 4 daughters together. He worked hard to support his family. Over time, he became known as a reliable worker. He learned how to be a labor contractor. A labor contractor is a person who hires workers for farmers. The farmer tells the contractor how many workers are needed, and the contractor finds the men, drives them to the fields, and pays them. This job gave one more responsibility and a steady income. However, one also had problems with his mental health. In early 1956, he began to act very strange. His half-brother, Natividad, thought one was having a mental breakdown. Because of this, Natividad had one taken to a mental hospital called DeWitt State Hospital. Doctors at the hospital said one had a type of schizophrenia. This is a serious mental illness where a person can have confusing thoughts, hear voices, or believe things that are not true. To treat him, the doctors gave one many sessions of electroconvulsive therapy. This is a treatment where a small electric current is passed through the brain. After 3 months of treatment, the doctors said he was better and let him go. But because he had entered the country illegally, he was sent back to Mexico after leaving the hospital. One wanted to return to the United States and his family. In 1962, he got a green card, which allowed him to come back legally. He returned to the Marysville area and went back to work as a labor contractor. People who knew him said he was usually a quiet and hard worker, but they also knew he could have a very bad temper. Sometimes his old mental illness would return. In March of 1970, he had to go back to the DeWitt State Hospital for more treatment. The next year, in March of 1971, he applied for welfare money because he was having financial problems, but his application was denied. In the spring of 1971, Juan Corona continued his work as a labor contractor in Sutter County, California. He was responsible for finding and managing farm workers for several local fruit ranches. One of these was the Sullivan Ranch, where a bunkhouse was used to lodge some of the men he hired. On May 19, 1971, a farmer named Ken Nacht was walking through his peach orchard, which was near the Sullivan Ranch. He noticed a patch of earth that looked freshly dug. It was about 7 feet long and 3 feet wide, like a grave. This seemed odd to him. The next day, he went back to the same spot. The hole had been filled in. He decided to call the Sutter County Sheriff's Department. Deputies arrived and dug at the spot. About 2 feet down, they found the body of a man. The man had been stabbed and slashed many times. He was later identified as Kenneth Whitaker, a transient farm worker. The discovery of this body started a massive search of the area. Police and volunteers began to search other nearby orchards and riverbanks. They used metal rods to probe the soft earth for more graves. Very quickly, they found another body, then another. All the victims were middle-aged white men. Most were transient laborers, people who moved from place to place looking for work. Many had minor criminal records or problems with alcohol. There were people who often went unnoticed. The search continued for weeks. More bodies were found. In total, 25 men were discovered buried in shallow graves around the area. All but one had been stabbed or hacked with a sharp weapon, like a knife or a machete. One victim had been shot. The killings had happened over several months, starting around February 1971. The police needed to find a connection between the victims. They soon learned that many of the dead men had done farm work in the area. They also learned that Juan Corona was a labor contractor who supplied workers to the very farms where the bodies were found. The bunkhouse on the Sullivan Ranch, where Corona housed workers, became a point of focus. While searching one of the graves, a deputy found a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was a receipt from a local meat market. The receipt had a signature on it. In another grave, they found 2 bank deposit slips. These papers had Juan Corona's name and address printed on them. This evidence physically linked Corona to the burial sites. Police also began to talk to people in the community. Some witnesses remembered seeing several of the victims in the weeks before they disappeared. These witnesses said the men were sometimes seen getting into a pickup truck. The description of the truck matched the one Juan Corona drove. Based on this evidence, the police went to a judge and got a search warrant for Juan Corona's home in Yuba City. Early in the morning of May 26, 1971, they entered his house and arrested him. They searched the house and his vehicles. During the search, the police took several items they believed were evidence. They found 2 knives that had what looked like bloodstains on them. They also found a machete and a pistol. They took some of Corona's clothing, which also had stains on it. Perhaps the most important thing they found was a ledger book, a notebook where Corona kept business records. In this book, he had written lists of names and dates. The police saw that the names of 7 of the murdered men were in this book. The dates next to their names were close to the times they were believed to have been killed. After Juan Corona was arrested, the police continued to gather evidence. The items taken from his home were sent to a lab for testing. The lab confirmed that the stains on the knives and clothing were human blood. The police also focused on the business ledger. They believed it was a record of the murders. The prosecution would later call it a death list. A grand jury was convened to hear the evidence. A grand jury is a group of citizens who decide if there is enough evidence for a trial. On July 12, 1971, the grand jury charged Juan Corona with 25 counts of murder. He was formally indicted. Because the crimes were so serious and famous, his first lawyer was replaced by a private attorney named Richard Hawk. The trial began in September 1972. It was moved to a different county called Solano because the judges felt he could not get a fair trial in Sutter County, where everyone had heard about the killings. The trial lasted for months. The prosecution showed the jury all the physical evidence. They showed the meat receipts and bank slips from the graves. They showed the bloody knives and clothes from his house. They explained how the names in his ledger matched victims. The defense lawyer, Richard Hawk, did not argue that Corona was insane. Instead, he argued that the police had the wrong man. He said the evidence was planted. He suggested the real killer might be Corona's half-brother, Natividad, who had a history of violence and had left the country. However, the defense did not call any witnesses to the stand. Juan Corona did not testify. The jury listened to all the evidence for over 3 months. They then discussed the case for 45 hours. On January 18, 1973, the jury found Juan Corona guilty of all 25 murders. The judge sentenced him to 25 life sentences in prison, 1 for each murder. Several years later, in 1978, an appeals court granted Corona a new trial. The court said his first lawyer had not done a good enough job investigating the case and had a conflict of interest. A second trial began in 1982. This time, the defense argued more strongly that Natividad was the real killer. Juan Corona did testify this time, but only for a few minutes. He answered 2 questions. He said he did not kill anyone. The new trial lasted 7 months. The jury again found him guilty. They did not believe the theory about his brother. Juan Corona was sent to state prison. His life in prison was difficult. In December 1973, other inmates attacked him in his cell. He was stabbed many times and lost an eye. He recovered but remained in prison. Over the years, he was denied parole 8 times. During a parole hearing in 2011, he admitted to the murders for the first time. He said the victims were trespassers. At a later hearing, he said he did not remember the crimes. In his old age, he developed Alzheimer's disease. Juan Corona died of natural causes in a hospital on March 4, 2019. He was 85 years old. The case of the murdered farm workers, one of the worst serial murder cases in American history at the time, was finally closed. Story 9. Rodney Halbauer was born on June 27, 1948, in the state of Wisconsin. Not long after his birth, his family moved to the city of Muskegon in Michigan. He grew up in this area. His family life was unstable. His parents divorced when he was a child. This event changed his home environment. As a young boy, Rodney began to show problems with behavior. He did not get along with other children. He often got into fights. He gained a reputation as a bully. He would pick on smaller or younger kids. He seemed to enjoy causing fear in others. He did not listen to teachers or other authority figures. His problems in school went beyond fighting. He was a frequent truant. This means he often skipped school without permission. He would not show up for class. Because of his truancy and his behavior, he was eventually kicked out of school. He did not complete his education. After being removed from school, he was sent to a state institution for juvenile offenders. This happened after an arrest. The institution was a place for young people who broke the law. Here, he was around other troubled teenagers. This environment did not improve his behavior. He learned more about crime from other juveniles. In 1963, he was released from the institution on parole. Parole means he was let out early under certain rules. He had to follow these rules, like meeting with a parole officer. He quickly violated the conditions of his parole. This means he broke the rules. Because of this violation, he was sent back. He was released again in 1964. Not long after his release, he was arrested for burglarizing a house. Burglary means he illegally entered a home to steal things. He was caught for this crime. He was sent to a county prison. In September of that year, he escaped from this prison. He was free for only a few days before he was captured again. For the burglary and the escape, he was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in a state prison. He was released from prison sometime later. In 1970, he was arrested again. This time, it was for robbery. Robbery means using force or threat to take something from someone. He was convicted of this crime. The court sentenced him to 4 years in prison. He served time for this offense. These were the main events of his early life and young adulthood. He moved from a troubled boy to a young man who was often in prison. His life was a pattern of release, crime, arrest, and imprisonment. After being released from prison in 1975, Rodney Halbauer left Michigan. He moved west and settled in Reno, Nevada. He found work doing odd jobs, but he did not stay out of trouble for long. In December of 1975, he attacked a young girl in Reno. He beat her and raped her. The victim survived. Halbauer was arrested for this crime. He was released from jail after paying bail. This meant he could wait for his trial while living in the community. His trial for this attack began in May of 1976. The court found him guilty of assault and rape. The judge gave him a sentence of life imprisonment. He was sent to a prison in Carson City, Nevada. In June of 1977, Halbauer was taken with other prisoners to a softball game outside the prison walls. This was a supervised trip. During this outing, he saw an opportunity and escaped. He ran away from the guards. He was now a fugitive. He was put on a wanted list. After his escape, he traveled. In July of 1977, he went to a location where his young daughter, who was 7 years old, was living. He tried to kidnap her. During this attempt, police officers captured him. He was extradited, which means officially sent back, to Nevada to serve his life sentence. He was not charged for the attempted kidnapping of his daughter. However, he was given an extra 6-year sentence for escaping from prison. On December 15, 1977, Halbauer escaped from the Nevada State Prison. He climbed onto the roof of a prison building. From the roof, he reached the outer fence and climbed over it. An investigation later showed the guards on duty did not do their job properly, which made the escape possible. The guards were disciplined. Once free, Halbauer stole a car. He drove north to Oregon. In Medford, Oregon, he attacked another girl. He raped her and stabbed her multiple times with a knife. The victim survived this violent attack. She later identified Halbauer to the police. However, he was not captured immediately after this attack. During the time he was a fugitive, from late 1975 into 1976, a series of murders happened in California. These happened in San Mateo County, south of San Francisco. The first victim was 18-year-old Veronica Cascio. On January 8, 1976, her body was found in a creek on a golf course in Pacifica. She had been stabbed approximately 30 times. A few weeks later, a 14-year-old girl named Tanya Blackwell left her home in Pacifica and disappeared. Her body was discovered on June 6, 1976, in a wooded area of Pacifica known as Gypsy Hill. She had also been stabbed many times. On February 2, 1976, 17-year-old Paula Baxter disappeared. Her body was found 2 days later in the city of Millbrae. She was naked. She had been stabbed 4 times. She had also been sexually assaulted and hit in the head with a blunt object. On May 6, 1976, the skeleton of a woman was found in a shallow grave in South San Francisco. She was later identified as 26-year-old Carol Booth. She had been reported missing in March. All of these women were killed in a similar way. During this same period, in February 1976, a woman named Michelle Mitchell was murdered in Reno, Nevada. She was killed near where Halbauer was living at the time. The police found cigarette butts near her body. At the time of these killings, the police in California did not have enough evidence to catch the killer. They did not have any witnesses. Forensic science, like DNA testing, was not advanced back then. The cases grew cold, meaning the investigation stopped because there were no new clues. For decades, no one was charged with these murders. Rodney Halbauer was eventually captured for the 1986 Oregon attack. He was arrested in early 1987. In March of 1987, he was convicted for that rape and assault. The court in Oregon sentenced him to 15 years in prison. However, he was first extradited back to Nevada to continue serving his earlier life sentence there. He remained in Nevada prisons for many years. In November 2013, Halbauer was released on parole from the Nevada prison system. Parole meant he could live outside prison under rules, but his release was immediate. Officials from Oregon were waiting for him. They extradited him to Oregon to begin serving the 15-year sentence from 1987. He was entered into the Oregon prison system. When a person enters a prison system, they often have to give a sample of their DNA. DNA is a unique biological code found in every cell. In 2013, Oregon authorities took a blood sample from Halbauer. They tested his DNA and put his genetic profile into a national crime database. This database holds DNA from convicted criminals. It also holds DNA collected from old, unsolved crime scenes. In September 2014, a computer match was found in the database. Halbauer's DNA profile matched DNA evidence from 2 of the 1976 California murders. His DNA matched biological evidence found on the body of Paula Baxter. It also matched evidence from the body of Veronica Cascio. This was the first major break in those cold cases. The same DNA database match also connected him to a murder in Nevada. His DNA matched saliva found on old cigarette butts. These butts were found near the body of Michelle Mitchell, who was killed in Reno in February 1976. This match proved Halbauer was also a suspect in that murder. The DNA match had another very important consequence. In 1980, a woman named Kathy Woods had been convicted of murdering Michelle Mitchell. She was a mental patient at the time. The new DNA test proved that she could not have committed the crime. The DNA belonged to Rodney Halbauer. In 2014, this new evidence exonerated Kathy Woods. After spending 35 years in prison for a crime she did not do, she was released in 2015. Based on the DNA matches, Rodney Halbauer was extradited from Oregon to California in January 2015. He was formally charged with the murders of Paula Baxter, Veronica Cascio, and Tanya Blackwell. In court, he pled not guilty to all charges. The legal process then faced many delays. Halbauer's trial in California did not happen quickly. In 2016, court psychiatrists examined him and found he was sane to stand trial. Halbauer then asked to represent himself in court. He also asked to fire his lawyers. A judge denied these requests. Part of the delay was because Halbauer also needed to face trial in Nevada for the murder of Michelle Mitchell. His California trial finally proceeded. In 2018, a jury found him guilty of the murders of Paula Baxter and Veronica Cascio. The jury could not reach a unanimous verdict regarding the murder of Tanya Blackwell, so that charge was left unresolved. For the two convictions, the judge sentenced Rodney Halbauer to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was sent to a California prison to serve this sentence. After the California trial, he was extradited back to Nevada. In Nevada, he faced trial for the murder of Michelle Mitchell. In 2021, he was convicted of this murder. For this crime, he received another life sentence without the possibility of parole. This sentence would be served after his California life sentence, ensuring he would never be released. One other murder from the 1976 period, the killing of Denise Lampy, was initially thought to be linked to Halbauer. However, DNA evidence eventually pointed to a different man, Leon Seymour. Seymour was convicted of that murder in a separate trial in 2023. Rodney Halbauer, now an old man, will spend the rest of his life in prison for the murders he committed decades ago. Story 10. Thor Nis Christensen was born in Denmark on December 28, 1957. When he was 5 years old, he moved with his parents to the United States. The family first lived in Inglewood, California. Later, they moved to the town of Solvang. In Solvang, his father, named Nis, opened and ran a restaurant. Thor grew up in this small town. For most of his school years, Thor was a good student. He did his work and got acceptable grades. This changed when he reached his junior year of high school. At that time, he began to neglect his schoolwork. His grades started to fall. He lost interest in his studies. Around this same time, Thor decided to move out of his parents' house. He was still a teenager, but wanted to live on his own. He also decided to leave high school without graduating. This is called dropping out. After leaving school, he needed a job. He found work as an attendant at a gas station. His job was to pump gas for customers and sometimes do simple repairs on cars. During this period after leaving school, Thor's body changed. He began to gain a lot of weight. He continued to gain weight until he weighed 275 pounds. This made him a very large, heavy man. His size made him noticeable to others. Thor was generally a quiet person. He did not have many friends. He did not have a girlfriend. He spent most of his time alone. He worked his job and kept to himself. He did not share his thoughts or feelings with other people. After some time living and working in Solvang, Thor decided to move again. He moved to a place called Isla Vista. Isla Vista is a community near the University of California, Santa Barbara. Many college students live there. In Isla Vista, Thor got a new job. He worked as a security guard. His job was to watch over buildings and property at night to prevent theft or damage. This job meant he often worked alone during late hours. In Isla Vista, Thor continued his habit of being alone. He lived by himself. He did not make friends with his neighbors or with the students around him. He went to work, came home, and stayed in his apartment. He was a person nobody really noticed or knew well. Thor Christensen lived and worked in Isla Vista. He owned a car. He began a pattern of driving around areas where young women were known to hitchhike. Hitchhiking is when a person stands by the road and asks for a free ride from drivers. In the 1970s, this was more common than it is today. His method was always the same. He would stop his car for a woman hitchhiker. He would offer her a ride. After the woman got into his car, he would drive to a remote area. These areas were often quiet canyon roads or places with few houses. Once he was in a secluded place, he would take out a gun. The gun was a .22 caliber pistol. He would shoot the female passenger in the head. This would kill her. After the woman was dead, Thor would then sexually assault her body. This is called necrophilia. He would do this in the remote location where he left the body. Then he would drive away. The first woman he killed was named Mary Saris. She was 19 years old. On December 6, 1976, she was hitchhiking. Thor picked her up. He drove her to a remote area near Los Alamos Canyon. He shot her in the head with his .22 caliber pistol. He sexually assaulted her after she was dead. He left her body there. Her remains were not discovered until May 22, 1977. The second woman he killed was named Jacqueline Rook. She was 21 years old. On November 20, 1976, she was also hitchhiking. Thor picked her up. He drove her to a place called Refugio Canyon near Santa Barbara. He shot her in the head. He sexually assaulted her after death. He left her body there. Her body was found on January 20, 1977. The third woman he killed was named Patricia Laney. She was 21 years old. She was last seen on January 18, 1977. Thor picked her up while she was hitchhiking. He drove her to Refugio Canyon, the same area as before. He shot her in the head. He sexually assaulted her after death. Her body was found the very next day, on January 19, 1977. All three women looked similar. They each had long, straight hair. They had a similar body build. They wore similar types of clothing. Because of this, people in newspapers began calling these the look-alike murders. The community of Isla Vista and the university campus became very frightened. People held demonstrations to protest violence against women. In early 1977, the police were looking for the killer. They did not know it was Thor. However, in February 1977, Thor was stopped by police for a minor reason. He was cited for being underage with alcohol. During this stop, the police saw he had a .22 caliber pistol in his car. They took the gun away from him because he was a minor. They did not connect this gun to the murders at that time. The police filed a report and let him go. After the 3 murders in Isla Vista, Thor moved to Los Angeles. He continued his pattern. On a date in April 1979, he picked up a 22-year-old woman named Laura Benjamin. She was hitchhiking. He drove her to a drainage culvert near Big Tahunga Dam. He shot her twice in the head. He sexually assaulted her body. He left her there. Her decomposed body was found on May 26, 1979. About a week after killing Laura Benjamin, on April 18, 1979, Thor picked up another hitchhiker. Her name was Lydia Preston. She was 24 years old. He drove for a few minutes. Then, without warning, he shot her in the side of her head. The bullet went into her ear. Lydia Preston did not die. She immediately jumped out of the moving car. She survived and managed to get to a hospital. Doctors removed the bullet. She recovered from her physical injury. Thor Christensen did not know she survived. He drove away and continued his life. Lydia Preston told the police about the attack. She described the man in his car. The police added this to their files. On July 11, 1979, Lydia Preston was in a bar in Hollywood, Los Angeles. She saw a man there who looked familiar. She looked closer and realized it was the man who had shot her. It was Thor Christensen. She left the bar and called the police. She told them she had found her attacker. This call gave the police a specific name and location for a suspect in her shooting. The police connected this new information to their old files. They remembered the .22 caliber pistol they had taken from Thor Christensen after a minor alcohol citation in February 1977. That was near the time of the Isla Vista murders. They now considered him a suspect for the older murders as well. Detectives began to gather more evidence. On July 27, 1979, the police arrested Thor Christensen. He was arrested for the murders of Patricia Laney, Jacqueline Rook, and Mary Saris from Isla Vista. He was put in the Santa Barbara County Jail. The bail was set very high at $500,000, so he could not get out. The police continued their investigation. They connected Thor Christensen to the Los Angeles crimes. On August 20th, 1979, he was charged with the murder of Laura Benjamin. The next day, August 21st, he was charged with the attempted murder of Lydia Preston. Thor Christensen first pleaded not guilty to all the charges. Then, on December 26, 1979, he changed his plea for the Isla Vista murders. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. This meant his lawyers would argue he was mentally ill and not legally responsible for his crimes. His trial for the murder of Laura Benjamin in Los Angeles began first. Before the trial started, on March 24, 1980, he changed his plea again. He dropped the insanity plea. His lawyers instead argued he had diminished capacity. This meant they argued his mental problems prevented him from planning the murder in advance, which could reduce the charge. During the trial, court psychiatrists examined Thor. They told the jury he had several mental disorders. They said he had an intermittent explosive disorder, which causes sudden violent outbursts. They said he had a paranoid personality. They confirmed he was a necrophiliac. They also said he had a history of chronic drug use. Thor himself described his crimes to the doctors. He said he would kill the women, take them to a secluded place, remove their clothes, and sexually explore their bodies. The jury listened to this testimony. On April 16, 1980, they found him guilty of first-degree murder for killing Laura Benjamin. They also found him guilty of assault for attacking Lydia Preston. The jury decided he was sane and had planned his crimes. On May 14, 1980, the judge sentenced him. For Laura Benjamin's murder, he received a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. For the attack on Lydia Preston, he received an additional 9 years. Next, his trial for the 3 Isla Vista murders was set to begin in Santa Barbara. The prosecution was ready for another long trial. However, on May 28, 1980, Thor Christensen surprised everyone in the courtroom. He changed his plea from not guilty to guilty. He pleaded guilty to all 3 counts of murder. This meant there was no need for a trial. On June 18, 1980, the judge sentenced him to life in a maximum security prison. This sentence would be served after his sentence from Los Angeles. Thor Christensen was sent to Folsom State Prison, a maximum security facility. On March 30, 1981, he was walking in the prison exercise yard. Another inmate walked up to him and stabbed him once in the chest. The wound was fatal. Thor Christensen died there in the yard. The other inmate was never identified, and no one was charged for his killing. After the case ended, the victims were remembered. Patricia Laney had been a community volunteer who worked with groups trying to stop violence against women. After her death, she became a symbol for this cause in the Santa Barbara area. An event called the Isla Vista Juggling Festival was started in her memory in 1977 and continued for decades. Lydia Preston, the woman who survived and identified him, returned to her life. The other victims' families and friends worked to remember their lives, not just their deaths. The story of these crimes and the community's response led to lasting discussions about violence against women and safety for hitchhikers. Thor Nis Christensen died in prison, serving justice for his actions.